What is up, guys? Welcome back to Just the Guy on My Lunch Break. So, everyone has heard by now that Dana White came down hard on one of the reporters in the press conference after UFC 310 the other night. And it had to do with a question that was asked of him about the performance of one of the fighters, Kron Gracie. Now, for a lot of people, it may just seem very simple. He doesn't like to say things bad about the fighters, but it's this specific fighter. It's very deserving that you guys should hear this information from a guy like me who has been watching the UFC since 1993 when it was on VHS tape. Literally, Royce Gracie walking into that octagon with that gi and choking out men that were 50, 60 pounds heavier than him was literally what started me training in jiu-jitsu, and it is also what caused me to fall in love with the sport of MMA. It really has become MMA. At that time, it wasn't really MMA. It was just a little bit of this, a little bit of that. People knew different things. And then this Gracie guy comes in with his jiu-jitsu, and nobody knew what the hell it was. So obviously he was taking everybody to school, choking people out, 50, 60 pounds heavier than him. But it was from that the sport started to grow and started to evolve. So I've been watching this sport for over 30 years now. So I did a little research. Some of it I already knew. Some of it I was going to expand on for you guys so that you really understand why Dana gave such a tongue lashing to this reporter who was trying to get him to talk shit about Kron Gracie's performance. I'm going to tell you why Dana refuses to do that, but I got to set it up first. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a quick video of a couple of Kron Gracie's kind of performances showing kind of how limited he is. He's a guy who only does jiu-jitsu. He basically doesn't do any striking whatsoever. Any attempts at striking that he does do is pretty shitty, if I'm being honest. He doesn't set anything up. You can tell he just doesn't have any training whatsoever. A lot of you may have seen him this past Saturday against Bryce Mitchell. He is jiu-jitsu only, okay? The whole mixed part of mixed martial arts, Kron doesn't do that. But I'm going to tell you why this pissed Dana off so much. So first, let's watch the video of Kron Gracie in the octagon. So check it out. Okay, now what I'm going to show you is Dana White's response to this reporter who asked him about Kron Gracie the other night. Okay, so let's take a look at that really quick.
And then what did you make of the Kron-Bryce Mitchell fight? Because in Kron's last fight, you were pretty critical of him. You said it was limited. Even Kron said it was the biggest mistake to kind of come in with one tool. Bryce knocked him cold with an elbow off the top. So just what did you make of Kron's performance and his future with the company?
So wait a minute. What's your question? So you're asking me, you're saying Kron looked really limited last time he fought, and he looked limited tonight. What's your opinion on?
I didn't think he was limited tonight.
No? What did you think?
I thought he had a better game plan than the fight he had against Charles Jourdain.
Okay. So you're like, what do you think about Weidman, this guy, and that guy tonight? I said they should retire. What do you think about Kron? Yeah. No, I don't like the way you're leading me down this road. I know what you're doing. You know the answer to the question, but you just want me to say it or something. You're saying Kron looked limited. What do you think? Do you have any other questions you want to ask me? Anything positive, or you want me to shit on everybody on the card tonight?
And then they're trying to get him in front of the whole world to sit and talk shit about the performance of Kron Gracie. The very first guy to ever come into the octagon, the first UFC champion, was a guy named Royce Gracie. Okay? Royce Gracie is the uncle of Kron Gracie, the guy who fought this past Saturday night. Now, what you're like, bro, you're taking me down this Gracie family tree. You're confusing me, bro. Get to the brass tacks. All right, here's the brass tacks. Ryan Gracie is literally the guy who is credited with coming up with the idea of fighting in an octagon-shaped mat-type platform with a fence around it. It's his idea. It's his brainchild. And I'm going to read you this real quick, and then we'll kind of expand on it. The Gracie who is credited with the idea for the UFC octagon is Ryan Gracie, the uncle of Kron Gracie. Okay? Kron Gracie, this guy that this reporter was trying to get Dana White to talk shit about the other night, his uncle is the one that came up with the idea of the UFC. His other uncle is the first ever UFC champion. Okay? He conceived the concept of an 8-sided fighting area to prevent fighters from easily escaping corners when creating the Ultimate Fighting Championship. Explanation. Ryan Gracie, a prominent member of the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu family, played a key role in establishing the UFC and is recognized for the idea of using an octagon-shaped ring for fights. The octagon design, introduced with the first UFC event, became the defining feature of mixed martial arts. You see all these headlines about why Dana got pissed at this reporter because he's trying to draw out negative comments from him about the performance of Kron Gracie. Dana White doesn't refuse to talk shit about anybody, okay? I mean, he said probably 3 different times in that press conference, yeah, they should retire. They should retire, right? But when asked about Kron Gracie, he wouldn't say a thing because the Gracie name is so intertwined with the very birth of the UFC. In fact, Royce Gracie's competing in it is literally the very thing that helped to get it off the ground. Everybody sees this young, slender, 176-pound Brazilian walk in with this gi on, and then standing across from him is a 220-pound guy, and this guy's going to get killed. He's going to get smashed. And then Royce Gracie goes in there and chokes him out, right? But listen, this is where I'm able to stop reading on Google and I'm able to, as a long-term fan, explain a few things. Okay, now I've trained in jiu-jitsu, and it was Royce Gracie and the influence of seeing him in the UFC that actually got me interested in jiu-jitsu. Now, this isn't the 1990s, and the problem that I have personally, and I spoke about this in another video, Kron Gracie fought this past Saturday night, and it is obvious that all this guy does is just roll jiu-jitsu all the time. He obviously does not train in boxing, does not train in kickboxing, does not train in wrestling, sambo, any other aspect of mixed martial arts that could help him, that he could integrate into his fighting style to become a better, more complete fighter. He just doesn't do it. He just doesn't do it. And a lot of people kind of have, to me, I kind of have sour grapes about this. You have the Gracie name. You have the grappling jiu-jitsu royalty lineage that you have to uphold. You should not only want to, you should feel some sort of obligation to grow with, to change with the sport as it evolves into what it is now. And I don't know if all you guys remember this, but Royce Gracie came back some years later after winning the first few UFCs, and he came up and he went up against a guy named Matt Hughes. Some of you may not have been watching it this long, but Matt Hughes was like this Midwestern Division I wrestler that came in. He was the welterweight champion at the time, and they were like, oh, how cool would that be to bring the first ever, UFC champion Royce Gracie back and could go in there and, see how he fares against Matt Hughes years after the sport has had time to grow and evolve, and the fighters have had time to get better and better and better and start to give it the mixed meaning that you train in all of those things. You don't just train in jiu-jitsu. You also train in wrestling. You also train in boxing. You also train in kickboxing, depending on what region of the world you're from. You might train in sambo. There's many others and iterations of them. And so they bring Royce Gracie, the original UFC champion, back in, and he gets dog walked by Matt Hughes, who is this Division I wrestler. out from the Midwest. Didn't even look like a fair fight. Royce Gracie, at this time, he was a little older. He still should have been able to make a good account of himself, but what it showed, without any uncertainty, that the sport is growing. The sport is moving along. The sport is evolving. And these people that are fighting in it now, they're doing it full time, right? Back in the very beginning, before this was a sport, anybody that entered those competitions, they might have taken karate for a few years or whatever, but they never trained, probably rarely ever sparred. And if they were, pretty good at one particular discipline, like say they were a kickboxer or something like that, they certainly didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu. It was unheard of at the time. They certainly didn't know karate and wrestling. People didn't know multiple things back then. They only knew one discipline. And so when they first started trying to mix it all together, the jiu-jitsu clan, they were able to take everyone off guard. No one was prepared for them. And so jiu-jitsu just became this really dominant thing. And they're like, oh, you got to know jiu-jitsu. You got to know jiu-jitsu. Because if you don't, you'll get in there and get this and that and a third. Well, then as the sport started to evolve, people started to not only acquire their stand-up skills, but then they also started to work on the jiu-jitsu skills. And then they started to incorporate the wrestling. And then they started to incorporate some Muay Thai and kickboxing techniques. And then it began at this time to be mixed martial arts. When Royce Gracie came back, it was a completely different sport. Everything had changed. And now here we are, 2024, guys. Okay, so that's over 30 years of evolution of these fighters getting better and better and better and better in individual areas. And then you have a fighter like Kron Gracie, who came in this past Saturday night, and his skill set literally looks like one of the jiu-jitsu guys back in the 90s. I think it's a shame, man. I really do. I think it's a shame. And I don't know why I feel some sort of way about this. And I talked about it in another video. I'm like, some of these elders, like Royce Gracie and Ryan Gracie and Rickson Gracie, some of these older jiu-jitsu elders, I feel like they need to gather these guys together and say, hey, man, this sport has changed. I mean, I know we started it. I know we got it off the ground, but this sport has grown, changed, evolved. If you're not going to go in there and do the mixed part, and you're going to go in there with one singular focus and one singular game plan of just trying to drag a guy down to the canvas so you can do your jiu-jitsu, you're making the whole Gracie name look bad, in my opinion. And I know, I get it. Gracie Jiu-Jitsu basically is jiu-jitsu. They have their own brand and their own version of martial art. When you have that sort of lineage and that sort of martial arts royalty, I think you have an obligation to change with as the sport evolves, and they're obviously not doing that. And obviously no one, Royce Gracie or otherwise, Ryan or Rickson, any of those have pulled these young guys aside who have MMA contracts and said, hey, let's open up a school over here that is designed to cater more towards the mixed part of martial arts, right? Let's don't just roll around all day and do jiu-jitsu. Everybody starting on your back and just let's roll for 30 minutes straight and see if we can choke each other out and get arm bars and kimuras. No. Go over here, train a little bit in kickboxing. Go over here, we'll bring someone in who's a wrestling coach. Bring this guy in, show you how to get a double leg takedown, show you how to start working different angles of the sport, right? These people who are only doing jiu-jitsu and are one-dimensional this day and age, they have no future in the sport. And they have no ability to be successful in the sport. This past Saturday night, Kron Gracie fought against Bryce Mitchell. Bryce Mitchell himself is known for being a jiu-jitsu ace. That's his main thing. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, right? So Bryce Mitchell is not even known for being a supreme striker or a superb striker. He made Kron Gracie looked like he didn't have a freaking clue what he was doing out there. Bryce Mitchell's not even all that good in striking. Kron Gracie was so incredibly obvious that he has not worked on developing any other area of skill in the mixed martial arts realm. All he does is jiu-jitsu. That's it. If you're Ryan Gracie, if you're the guy that when I Google your name, I see that you were the one that came up with the idea of the UFC. You were the one that is credited with coming up with the octagon. You were the one that came up with the idea of MMA, mixing and blending different martial arts together. You have a responsibility. Under your tutelage, the people should be looking to do just that, mix the martial arts together. And it's unfortunate because when it first started, it was basically a pissing contest, a way for those jiu-jitsu guys to say, our shit's the best. And it was, because they would invite people into their dojos, people who's a karate specialist or boxers or whatever. They would invite them into the dojo, let's see if you can beat me, and then of course they'd take them down and choke them out because the boxer didn't know what the hell they were going to do. The karate guy, his karate didn't work when he was on the mat, obviously. And if they had no way to defend against it and didn't know what was about to happen, obviously, in the beginning, I think their idea of it was less about one person learning all of the different martial arts and mixing them together in that way. Their idea was, you have wrestling, you have boxing, you have karate, you're a kung fu guy, you're a taekwondo guy, I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. Let's mix us all together in one competition and see who comes out on top. But as it began to evolve, the sport kind of took on its own connotations. People started taking mixed martial arts literally, like, well, hell, I'm just gonna become good at all of them. If you want to be one of the greatest in the sport, you have to be as good as you possibly can in all the disciplines. So let's take the things that are good about jiu-jitsu and let's put them in our arsenal. Let's take the good things that come out of taekwondo. Bring in the wrestler, bring in the sambo guy. They took it literally. Oh, mixed martial arts? Okay, cool. That means one person needs to mix all of those martial arts together and then put that into their own skill set if you want to be the very best fighter that you can possibly be. Ryan Gracie and all them, I don't think they saw it that way. They looked at it as, oh, you're wrestling, you're boxing, you're taekwondo, you're karate, I'm jiu-jitsu. Let's all get in there together and let's see who whoops whoever's ass. What happened is, because they aren't willing to adapt and evolve, they're being left behind in the sport. If you're Kron Gracie and you do nothing but jiu-jitsu, you go in there and look like an idiot, pulling guards, scooting around on the mat, trying to get a guy to come jump in your guard with you because that's the only way you know how to fight. And I mean, everybody knows, about Royce Gracie, his beginnings with the UFC, or at least a lot of people do. Some of you younger folks, he's kind of this legend, one of the front runners, but you never actually watched him because you're younger. I actually watched him. And it was one of the things that inspired me to take jiu-jitsu. It inspired me to continue watching the sport before it was really even considered a mainstream sport like it is now. I think it's pretty sad. I think they need to come in and say, hey, look, if you're not going to learn the mixed part and you're not going to, train in all of these other areas and stuff, just stick to jiu-jitsu tournaments, bro. Don't go in there in MMA making the rest of the jiu-jitsu people look bad. In the beginning, this was a pissing contest, and we were the baddest men on the planet, and we proved it on a world stage when the karate guy came in, when the boxer guy came in. We were the shit. And now you're going out there in front of millions and millions and millions of people in a sport called mixed martial arts, and you're trying to make it a jiu-jitsu match. Jiu-jitsu only works in a jiu-jitsu match if your partner is willing to play jiu-jitsu with you as well. As good as guys are these days in their jiu-jitsu, in their wrestling, in their kickboxing, in their Muay Thai and everything, jiu-jitsu ain't shit by itself. Not in MMA, it's not. So that's why Dana White gets so pissed off when the guy tried to make him talk shit about Kron Gracie's uncles started this shit. They are the ones that if it was not for them, Dana White would not be where he is now with this billion-dollar industry. Now, all credit to Dana. He's taken it and he's made it what it is today. He's a hell of a businessman, obviously. But he's not going to sit there and talk shit about the nephew of the guy that basically started the UFC, of the guy that he was the first ever UFC champion and is the one that made people fall in love with the idea of mixed martial arts, right? He's not going to do that. Dana's not stupid, but he'll talk shit about everybody else. Anyway, that's what I got. If you guys enjoy this sort of real, objective content from an old head that's been watching this sport since 1993, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and also leave a comment down below if you would. I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.